Hi, I'm Jen, and this is another Books and Looks video. In these videos, if you're new, I get ready for the day, put my makeup on while I talk about a book that I have recently read. And if you have any recommendations of books that you would like me to read and review in future videos, comment them below and perhaps I will feature it in one of my future videos. Today, I'm going to be talking about a book that I read in December called The Christmas Demon, Sherlock Holmes, A Christmas Demon. So it's a Sherlock Holmes book, and it's written by James Lovegood, and it is very true to canon. It's told from the point of view of Watson, and it's, a mystery that Sherlock solves. It is a full novel. It's not a short story like a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories are. But I really did enjoy it. And I think it's kind of funny because in December, I thought I want to read a Christmas book, and I chose The Christmas Demon. So there's a little bit of irony there, but I really enjoyed it, and let me tell you about it. So, this book takes place at the same time as all the Sherlock Holmes books do, back in the 1800s, and Sherlock and Watson are partners. In this story, they are approached by a young woman who is about to turn 21, and on her 21st birthday, she is expected to receive an inheritance from her aunt. Now, her aunt was very particular in her regulations for how and when to give her the money. So basically, a little bit of backstory is that Eve, that's the girl, Eve, her mother passed away by suicide a few years earlier, and the aunt basically said she only gets the money if she is of sound mind, because when Eve's mother died by suicide, she had some mental health issues. It wasn't diagnosed or anything because it's the late 1800s, and so as it's described by the narrator, I kind of got the idea that she was bipolar and had some manic disorders and depressive disorders, so she ended up dying by suicide. And so Eve was supposed to get the inheritance from her aunt, and she was very particular, saying, I don't want her to have it if she isn't of sound mind, and in case it's genetic, etc. So here Eve is, it's a week before her birthday to turn 21 and get the inheritance, and creepy things start happening. So she lives in this big mansion. Her family is very wealthy, but again, it's the 1800s, so it's her father's money. She has an allowance, so she has money, but it's not her money, it's her father's money. She also has a brother that lives in the mansion with her and her father. His name is Raz. It's actually Erasmus, but they all call him Raz. So her brother Raz lives there, as does she and her father. And then her father's brother, her uncle, lives there, Thaddeus. And he lives there with his wife, who's a very minor character, really not that important. But more importantly, her cousin and her husband also live in this big mansion. So it's her dad, and her brother, and then her dad's brother, wife, daughter, and husband. So all these people live there. They're very wealthy. They have, maids and cooks and a butler and servants and everything. Your typical 1800s super wealthy family. Well, the reason Eve hires Sherlock is because in the previous weeks, some creepy things start happening to her, and she's worried that she's losing her mind, that she's losing her mental stability, and therefore she's not going to be eligible for this inheritance. And because it's the 1800s, the only way she'll ever have her own money is this way. Her aunt only has this money because she married a wealthy man who passed away, and then she, as the widow, got to keep it. So then when the aunt died, she willed it to her niece so that it would, girl power situation. So Eve's starting to think that she's losing her mind because weird things keep happening. So another little bit of backstory that's related is Eve's mother used to tell like a childhood story called about the Black Thoric, which is kind of like the Krampus, the evil Santa Claus. But in this little lore and little fairy tale, the Thoric comes after bad children, and in the month of December gives them little bundles of sticks that imply that they're being bad children. And on Christmas Eve, if they don't, behave, the Black Thuric is going to come and get them and eat them on Christmas morning. So scary stuff, but I mean, is it any scarier than a strange fat man coming into your house to drop random presents, possibly coal? It's all weird. But Eve's thinking that she's losing her mind because she starts finding little bundles of twigs in her bedroom, around the house. And then also a couple of times she woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window and thought she saw this like black split spindly creature in the backyard, running around. So she believes that this demon, the Christmas demon, the Black Thuric, is coming to get her. But here she is, 20 years old, an adult. And so she's very confused. She thinks she's losing her mind. What's going on? So she hires Sherlock. Sherlock and Watson come and move into the mansion for a week to try to investigate and solve this issue and help her. So as they're there, of course, they, interact with her family. They get to know stuff that's happening. And little by little, they start figuring out all kinds of things that are like questionable in this family. So first of all, her father is a total jerk. He's like insulting and mean to both her and her brother all the time. And then you slowly find out that he was always kind of mean and rude, I guess. And the only time that he was ever really cool and kind was when their mother, who has since passed, when their mother was in a good mental state, the family, like, everything was wonderful. They were happy. They would sing songs. Everything was great. But since the mother died, he has been nothing but grumpy. And it has been about a year since mom died. So that's one person. And then Sherlock slowly finds out that her brother, who seems to be like gone and out and about really often, he's like never home. He figures out that he has been going out gambling and has gotten himself in some trouble. Now, in the timeline of the book, you don't find that out until a little bit later, but if you're a savvy reader, and not to toot my own horn, but like I read a lot, so I saw it coming, Sherlock figures out that Raz has been going to town, and he has all these excuses like, oh, I was going to the store, oh, I was doing this, but really he was going to gamble. So he has been gambling and unsuccessfully. So he has serious gambling debts. And Sherlock, figures that out and realizes that the people that he owes money to have basically threatened his life if he doesn't pay them. So in the meantime, Sherlock also figures out that through his observation and questioning, and just because he's, a deductive genius, he recognizes that the cousin's husband is a cheater. And he has been cheating on her like their entire relationship. She knows it. And, what can you do? It's the 1800s. Your husband cheats on you. That's, too bad. That sucks. So the cousin is like really distraught and unhappy in her marriage, and her husband just keeps cheating on her. As a matter of fact, he's been cheating on her with the maid, Becky. So the maid and the husband have been having an affair. And in the meantime, the cook and the butler are also married. And another big mystery that has been going on that the cook is really insistent about is that the east wing of the mansion is haunted. And it's been haunted ever since the mother died. And they believe it's her ghost haunting the east wing. And Becky and the cook are like, oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. I've seen ghosts. I've heard ghosts. Every time I go over there to like do any cooking, or excuse me, not cooking, cleaning, or like maintaining the house or whatever, it's definitely haunted. There's something going on over there. And Sherlock, being a very logical person, is like, doubtful. So he goes over and investigates. And of course, he finds all kinds of surprising things. For example, he notices that there is a room that is kind of like a cellar where the floor is all dirt. And it looks like it has been recently dug up. And then he also does some investigation into the family history, and he comes to find out that, this family that's, been very wealthy for generations and generations, they have offshoots and cousins and stuff, but if you go back far enough, the previous owner from like 100 years ago or something, maybe 150 years ago, of this mansion, like the old ancestor who built this mansion, was actually a really horrible person and like was a devil worshiper and buried people on the property, which wasn't that abnormal back then. Like back then, it was pretty normal for very wealthy families to have like graveyards on their property, or maybe even in the basement of their house, like a crypt where they would bury their family members. So Sherlock kind of assumes that this little area is like the old family crypt where they, buried ancestors and whatnot. And so he's, that's suspicious. It's also in the East Wing. So he starts, digging up all this stuff about the family and starting to kind of, as he does, put the pieces of the puzzle together and figure out what's actually going on. So he realizes that the husband and Becky were having an affair. And shortly thereafter, when they were out and about investigating, Sherlock and Watson were out and about investigating, they hear a scream come from the East Wing tower. And when they go over there, they find Becky outside on the ground, outside of the tower window, seemingly have fallen out. And what they notice is it looks like she either pushed or was jumped out or was pushed. And Sherlock is like, I need to go up there and look around and see what I can figure out. And Sherlock, being Sherlock, looks around and he, by the footprints or whatever, figures out that there was a scuffle and she was pushed. And like he figured out before, he knew that Becky and the cousin's husband were having an affair. So he's like, oh, well, clearly the husband killed her because, maybe she broke up with him or maybe whatever reason. Like, he's a scoundrel, so it makes sense. And so he calls him on it and basically says, like, so tell me about your relationship with Becky. And he freaks out and runs. So everybody thinks that he did, in fact, kill Becky, pushed her out the window because they were having an affair, and for whatever reason, he killed her. So that's what everybody believes. Spoiler alert, that's not what happened. So, more information about the East Wing, they figure out that the reason Becky said that the East Wing was haunted was because that's where they would go to have their affairs. So she wanted to make sure nobody would, end up in there and find them having their affair and ruin everything. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to all of them, the wife totally knew about it, and Sherlock figured this out as well. So Sherlock realizes that the wife knew all about it. And the reason he figured this out was because Becky had on this beautiful diamond necklace. And Becky, as a maid, there's no way she would have ever been able to afford this. So he puts the pieces together, as he usually does, and recognizes that this necklace is a match for the bracelet that the wife, wore the other day. So he's like, oh, she clearly gave this woman the necklace as like a bribe to stay away from her husband. And it turns out to be true, because then when he questions the cousin and says, hey, is this what happened? And she basically was like, yes, you're absolutely right. That's my husband's an awful person, but what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Well, so everybody assumes that the husband killed Becky. And so the husband basically gets locked up in one of the rooms until they can call the police, because they're, this is the country estate in the 1800s. It's going to take like a day or two to get the coroner and the police officers and whatnot. So they lock him up in the one room, and they continue the investigation, because now they figured out how Becky died, but they still don't know who or what the Black Thuric is or why it's attacking Eve. And of course, we as the reader are like, well, clearly somebody's trying to get her money or trying to take over and get her inheritance. And so this is where Sherlock then comes in and says, well, let's talk to your brother Raz, because, hey, Raz, tell us about your gambling debts. And Raz, breaks down and cries. He's like, oh my gosh, how did you know? I've been trying so hard to keep this a secret. And he's like, well, the maid and the cook and even your aunt mentioned that little trinkets have been going missing for the past few weeks. And I went into town just to kind of stroll around, and I popped into the pawn shop and I saw all these missing trinkets for sale in the pawn shop. And so Raz admits, he's like, okay, fine, yes, I have major gambling debts and I've been nicking these objects and selling them to the pawn shop so that I can pay off my debts, but it's not enough. And I don't know what else to do. They're threatening my life. So, yes, I have been tormenting my sister. I feel awful about it, but that's, I've been doing the bundles of sticks because I need this money. And of course, Eve is like, are you kidding me? Like, you're my brother. If you would have just asked me for money, I would have given you some and helped you. And so she basically forgives him because he like begs for forgiveness. He's like, I'm so sorry. You're right. I don't know what I was thinking. I was out of my mind. I was terrified. I was stressed, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I will pay off your debts when I get my inheritance in a few days. But you have to promise me you're going to stop going to town and gambling. You have to promise me that you're going to stay away from these thugs that have taken all of your money and threatened your life. And he's like, I will, absolutely. So that part all gets resolved. It's absolutely lovely. However, we still don't know what the creature is that she's been seeing out and about, because a couple of times in the middle of the night, Eve wakes up and sees this creature in the back fields, like all dark and creepy. So that's when Sherlock is like, well, okay, sure, I can tell you what that is, but I need another day. So he actually like leaves the mansion and goes. He says he's going back to London because he solved the murder mystery. He solved what was happening with the stick. So he's like, there you go, problem solved. But that's not the whole story, and he knows it. He actually said that intentionally because he knew who the real murderer was and who the real Black Thuric was and everything that's going on. And he wanted that person to think he got away with it so that he would continue and they could catch him red-handed, right? So he does that. He leaves, but he doesn't actually leave. He hides out overnight in the woods until he can catch the real culprit red-handed. And as it turns out, I don't know if you'll be able to guess this. It's a little cliche, but the butler did it. Okay. Cliche, but it had a bit of a twist. It wasn't just like your standard, like the butler was mad for being a butler and not treated well or whatever. That was part of it. But as Sherlock figured out, he was, looking at artwork in the mansion and the family coat of arms and things of that nature. And he recognizes that the butler had some similar things and connections to the family that were very interesting. So being the deductive genius that he is, he figures out that the butler is actually a long-lost cousin of this wealthy family and has been going down into the East Wing basement. Remember when he saw that stuff looked like it had been dug up in the basement or the cellar? And so Sherlock realizes that the butler has been going down there and looking for a particular artifact from one of his ancestors who was buried on the property so that he can prove that he is a legitimate family member and actually the rightful heir of the fortune and the mansion and everything, and basically is going to kick everybody out and say, this is my home now. Y'all are awful. Get out. Get off my property. Blah, 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 blah. Give me all your money. It doesn't work, though, because Sherlock catches him as he is out there in the middle of the night trying to find this artifact. And he was really close to finding it. So Sherlock had really good timing, as always. So Sherlock catches him red-handed, digging around and trying to find this artifact. And when he calls him out, as many mysteries do, he admits to everything. The butler is like, you're right, this is my inheritance. I'm part of this family. My great-great-grandfather was your great-great-grandfather's brother, but your great-great-grandfather was an awful human being, and my great-great-grandfather was a much better person. Therefore, he and I deserve all of this, not you terrible people. You're the dad, you're a mean person. You treat your kids awfully. Your son is a gambler, a degenerate, and is like messing with your sister, and your sister is about to get this, Eve is about to get this inheritance, and it's all messed up, and just everything is wrong, and it should all be mine. And when he confesses to everything, the dad, like the patriarch, is, he loses his mind, as does the brother, and they like attack him and beat him up, and basically like get rid of him and say like, you're done, you're out of here. And at this point, everybody's like, Sherlock, you're a genius. How did you figure this out? And, oh, it's elementary, my dear. It's easy. It was logic, blah, blah, blah. So the story ends with a positive note. They get rid of the evil butler who was trying to steal their money. By the way, he was the one who killed Becky because Becky caught him digging around in the basement and like questioned him and was like, "What are you doing?" And actually blackmailed him and said, I'll tell on you. I'll tell on you unless you give me some of the inheritance." So he killed her. He was like, no, and he pushed her out the tower window. So he killed the girl. He was the ghost that was making weird noises in the East Hall at night, and his wife, the cook, was sort of in on it, knew what he was doing, and was kind of helping him by keeping people out of the East Wing and perpetuating the ghost story. But Sherlock figured it all out. All these different subplots that like all came together in the end. It was nicely done. It was nicely written. I liked the twist at the end. It was a little cliche. The butler did it, but that's okay. Sometimes cliches are perfectly acceptable and fine. So I would give this a, what would I give it? I would give it an 8 out of 10. Oh, excuse me. I would give it an 8 out of 10. And the only reason I don't give it more is because it took quite a while to really pick up. So I loved the story. I loved the plot. I loved the twist at the end. I loved how good it was with the canon. It absolutely fit canon, and I'm pretty familiar with Sherlock Holmes. How's that? It's a little redder than I would like, but it's all right. It'll do. So anyway, it's really close to canon. Sherlock's personality, Watson's personality, all there, very well done. The way it all came together logically, really well done. I really did like it. The only reason I wouldn't give it a full 10 out of 10, like I said, is because it did take a little while to get into the story, to get into the exciting part of the story. And this might seem weird, but nobody died until Becky died. And I like a good murder mystery. I like when somebody is, that there's a murder and you have to figure out who did it and figure out how and why and when. So, and while that was an element of the story, it was not as much of an element as I had hoped. That's not unlikely for Sherlock stories. Sherlock stories very rarely have death in it. They're more theft or things of that nature, which is nice. It's nice, you don't have to, but if it had more murder mystery type stuff, or if it had a little bit more action at the get-go, I probably would have given it a 10 out of 10. But generally speaking, I loved it. Highly recommend it, especially if you like Sherlock Holmes stories, or if you like mysteries, any of that kind of stuff, or stories that take place in the 1800s. It fits all of that. I highly recommend it. It was good. Yeah, so I think I am done. Let's see. Yeah, it's on my basic look. Nothing too extravagant. There we go. Nothing too extravagant, but I hope you like my look. I hope you like the book. And as always, if you have any suggestions on products for me to try when I do my looks, or books you want me to read and review, please post comments below. I love to hear from people, and I'll try to respond to anybody who comments. And who knows, maybe in a future video, I'll be reviewing a book you recommend. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And as always, stay beautiful inside and out. Thanks. Bye.